Let's talk supply chain. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Supply Chain. So, let's kick things off with a question. Today's guest recently carried out a global consumer retail return survey, and it revealed some fascinating results. So, many brands are considering tighter return policies, but what percentage of global respondents will stop shopping at their favorite retailer if those stricter return policies are implemented? What do you think? Let me know your guesses over on social and keep listening because I'll let you know at the end of the show. So today I'm joined by a business that's modern innovations and unmatched industry expertise help more than 3,000 retailers, manufacturers, and logistics service providers confidently navigate supply chain complexity and disruption. Well, who are they? Well, it's Blue Yonder. So Blue Yonder is the world leader in end-to-end digital supply chain transformation. With a unified AI-driven platform and multi-tier network, Blue Yonder empowers businesses to operate sustainably, scale profitably, and delight their customers all at machine speed. And I'm joined by Tim Robinson, Senior Vice President of Commerce and Returns. Tim is an accomplished entrepreneur with over 3 decades of experience working across large public sector industries and private businesses. And today we're going to be talking all about returns. We're going to be sharing insights from Blue Yonder's Global Consumer Retail Returns Survey. That is a mouthful. And reflecting on what they mean for both retailers and consumers. We're going to be exploring inventory management and tariff turbulence and what they mean for your return strategy. We'll also be shining a light on why returns aren't just an afterthought anymore. They're actually the encore. So welcome to the show, Tim.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I'm delighted to be here, and thanks for a great intro.
Yeah, we're excited to have you here. Now, Blue Yonder has been on Let's Talk Supply Chain a couple of times before. So if you haven't checked it out, go and check out episodes 417 and 434. We've talked about what you do. We've talked about synchronizing supply chain execution. And I'm looking forward to diving into a brand new topic with you today. So can you start by introducing yourself, your journey, give us a bit of an overview of Blue Yonder as well for anyone that might not know?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'd be delighted to. As you say, I've spent most of my career in supply chain, pretty much from leaving college to where we are today. Like many people, you don't, I think it's quite rare that you isolate and identify supply chain as your
Right.
chosen life, your chosen goal in life. But, I fell into it and have loved it ever since. And it's been good to me in as much as I've had the opportunity to work in some of the largest, most influential supply chain businesses there are. But I've also had the opportunity to be in the founding team and the founder of a couple of businesses that have gone on to be big players in their own field. And ultimately, that's how I've ended up in Blue Yonder. I launched a business in the United Kingdom back in 2013, 2014 called Doddle. And Doddle's mission was to, in an age of e-commerce growth and changing consumer habits, our mission ultimately was to delight consumers, but help drive profits for our customers who are retailers and logistics business, predominantly through creating the best, most digitally powered delivery and returns journeys. And thankfully, Blue Yonder saw something great in that business, and here I am today.
That's awesome. Now, I have to ask you because I feel like supply chain professionals come up with the best names. How'd you
Yeah.
come up with Doddle?
Well, it's actually British slang. So if we Brits, we say if something's easy, we say it's a doddle. Like, how hard is that, Tim? Oh, it's a doddle. It'll be a doddle. Don't worry, it's easy. And so the whole premise was we were going to make online shopping easy for consumers and for their retail suppliers, and therefore doddle made a huge amount of sense. To be fair, that business became global quite quickly, and the relevance of Doddle got diluted pretty much by the day to the extent that there are parts of the world where Doddle means very different things, and it was quite awkward. So
I
we
was
got through
gonna
it, though.
say.
We got through it.
That's awesome. No, I was gonna say because, a word can mean one thing in
Yeah,
one place, and then it can
yeah,
mean other things in other places. And I've seen that with a lot of the Canadian words and things like that. And
yeah.
so the fact that it went global and that was something that you had to contend with,
Yeah,
coming from a global trade background.
yeah,
That's
that's it.
the one thing in business you have to learn is that you might not know where the business is going to go. So make sure that the name can be global.
I learned that one the hard way.
So we're going to be talking about omni-channel commerce returns today. It makes sense from your background in the company that you had founded and started. Can you just start by giving us an overview of returns? Like what your recent survey really revealed about how critical they are to the overall shopping experience? And I think, order returns, the experience really impacts consumer spend, their loyalty, and sometimes it can be, a great thing and a really bad thing for a supply chain all at the same time. People love
Oh,
to hate
absolutely.
it. So talk to me about this.
And I think that's a great tee up really for this answer because free returns, easy access returns, buy as many as you like, return as many as you like. Ultimately, that philosophy, put to market by retailers large and small over the last 20 years has been one of the major drivers behind the success of e-commerce. How do you create the convenience and the relevance of physical shopping, where I can see a product, I can touch it, I can try it on. How do you recreate that in the virtual world?
Right.
Free returns, easy returns, kind of the abundance of returns has been a key driver of the growth. And therefore it has been, one of those features of online shopping that has attracted the attention of the chief customer officer
Right.
of big brands, the kind of those that obsess about loyalty and checkout conversion, all those sorts of things, been a high focus. And I would say over the last 10, 15 years, a lot of venture capital dollars have gone into the customer experience end of returns. Make sure that online experience is beautiful. Come up with the best drop-off locations. Make it really convenient for the consumer. And that's been a real kind of theme. But I would say more recently, the our customers, and our favorite brands, us consumers, have really started to feel the pain of that
Yep.
philosophy and those decisions that were made in the past. A bit like me calling a local business Doddle and then suffering on the global stage, offering free returns, driving up adoption, seeing revenues grow, being super excited, and now starting to feel the pain. And that is because there are real, genuine, real life implications to encouraging consumers to buy more than they need,
Yeah.
and to be, a little more frivolous in their shopping habits.
Yeah.
And so, Blue Yonder is best known as a supply chain business, supply chain optimization, end-to-end supply chain interoperability. And you might think, well, why return? Isn't returns like a customer experience thing? Isn't it
Mhm.
like it's about that checkout thing? That's not where you guys play, but actually we've seen over the last few years that whilst you've got planners that plan inventory and ranges and products, and you've got logistics, supply chain, transport people that execute, it's actually the consumer that shapes demand,
Yeah.
their choices, their preferences. And so now we've all learned in the industry that consumers also shape the supply chain, and therefore we need to link the two.
Yeah.
So those
No,
great consumer
absolutely.
experiences need to now feed up and downstream supply chain solutions, workflows, technologies, and.
Yeah, well, and there's so much logistics that go into the returns.
Mm,
There's even like a quality component that a lot of people don't think about. So, I'm going to return the product that I bought to the store, or I'm going to return it through, maybe a UPS store for Amazon to get it back into inventory. But when they get it into inventory, what does that look like? Can I put it back on shelf?
yeah.
Can I repackage it? Does it have to be donated? Does it go into waste? Like what is the afterlife of that product when that consumer doesn't want it? And so there's
Yeah.
logistics in getting it out to the customer, and then there's logistics in getting it back. And those free returns, like you said, I mean, people have had to get, or retailers have had to get really creative. I remember talking about Nick's. They responded to a customer and said, "Oh, well, if you don't want the product, please go find somebody that you can donate it to." But that
Yeah.
costs money too. And so there's a way, there's a balance here, right?
There
How
really
much
is.
is it
Yeah.
going to cost me to return that one product? And what does that look like towards our sustainability goals and et cetera?
Yeah.
Versus I'm going to let you keep it and then you can do whatever you want. And then it's not on our
Yeah.
sustainability goals because if you decide to throw it out, that's
Over
not
to you. Over
right.
to you, Mr. Consumer. Yeah.
And so there's a lot of creative, I think,
There is.
options that retailers have really started to dive into. And I think cost to serve comes into it as well, right? Because, like I said, there's a cost on either side of that. So
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about a couple of factors that are impacting this discussion around inventory management and returns.
Yeah.
The first one is the big T, which everybody's probably doesn't want to hear about it anymore, but it's tariffs.
Yeah.
From your perspective, what's happening right now with tariffs? Like I've seen reports they could lead to product shortages. It's obviously putting a turbulence on sourcing teams, procurement teams, logistics teams, but also the last mile delivery teams as well. And I think it's squeezing some of those margins in the shelf. So talk to us about what's happening right now.
Yeah, very much so. I think, this is ultimately, an age of uncertainty when it comes to inventory management of any sort, if you are in a business that relies on crossing borders for any reason. So, and ultimately, whilst the challenge around tariffs may have emanated in one part of the world. The reality is the ripple effect is it's now this whole landscape is resetting itself. Resetting itself regardless of where you are. So this is a global phenomenon now. I would say. I'll come back to the immediate effects. I would say that, like, having been in this sector for a long time, we've had this a few times before. I can go right back to year 2000, Y2K, where there was lots of uncertainty and premiums were being charged, for trades in different parts of the world. And then we had the fuel crisis, and it was all about fuel surcharging and charging more. In 2008, 2009, 2010. And so there have been big spiky cost impacts on the supply chain in the past that we've all managed to work our way through over time, and ultimately leave those new unexpected costs in a part of the supply chain that allows it to continue to grow. I think this time it's just so prevalent everywhere. It's so global that it's hard for retailers and supply chain professionals to really understand and predict how to react in every single case. But ultimately, I think as it relates to returns, I think it's forcing good behavior. And what I mean
Okay.
by that is, historically, I think it's right to kind of level a bit of criticism on the supply chain and supply chain professionals that actually there wasn't enough focus and energy put into understanding the options you have for managing returning inventory. That if you the potential you've got, if you treat that inventory like brand new product and brand new assets, to resell that item at full price in the market in which it is existing, without it having to go long distance back into a distribution center or back to a vendor where it crosses borders and I think the that age of kind of a lack of attention to detail and therefore waste has been put under the microscope, because there's now a
Yeah.
brand new cost associated with some of those decisions that you might have sleepwalked into in the past.
Hmm.
You now have to think about it. So what does it do? Well, it forces supply chain professionals and supply chain managers to actually manage. We're encouraging our customers and our partners to take on that more responsible approach to this particular, let's call it, bucket of inventory. Treat it with the respect it deserves. Like, orchestrate your supply chain so that you can resell that item in the market in which it exists. Maximize its value, make sensible decisions,
Yeah.
almost prioritize that inventory before anything else.
Well, especially with margins as they are right now.
Yeah,
Margins look a lot different today than they did about a year ago.
absolutely do. Yeah,
And so there was a little bit more leeway, I think, in that side of the inventory management where
yeah,
brands could get creative, like I was talking about before. But on the flip side, I've bought a pair of pants online and they have sat in my house for 8 to 10 weeks
yeah,
because they
yeah,
couldn't get me a return label quicker than that. And that
yeah.
is capital sitting out there. And so I think you're right. I think for
Crazy,
us
isn't it?
to take a look at this side of inventory management, what's the cost to serve? What's the balance here? What's the cost on either side? How do we get it back in? How do we help the consumer not to waste either? Does it mean that we put in maybe some additional packaging into the package for them to be
Yeah,
able to return it easier and the garment goes into a clean bag?
yeah,
Right?
exactly
Because at
that.
the end of the day, we're all going to do what we think we need to do to get it back to you as soon as possible because
Yeah,
we don't want it here in
yeah,
our houses or in our offices and things like that. We want to get it back to you. But then what happens when it gets back to
exactly
you?
that.
What does that look
I mean,
like?
if you think about in recent times, there has been a sort of an emerging trend for retailers to charge consumers for refunds, for returns.
Hmm.
Try and get a contribution to the shipping cost.
Right.
What about if you flip that the other way and you rewarded the consumer for returning the item within 10 days?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
you've got a very high likelihood then that that SKU is still in season and there is still demand out there in your ecosystem for that item. So
Mhm.
instead of charging $2.50 or $4 to get the item back, why not reward with a $4 gift card? And actually, that means instead of getting a small contribution to the shipping cost and then selling that item heavily discounted, you're selling it at full value and you're satisfying and delighting another customer. I just
Yeah.
think it's a philosophical mindset thing, which which is the big opportunity in the sector. We have great technology to, if you make that philosophical shift, we have great technology to support you executing new policies, new rules. But you do organizationally and as a brand, you do need to go through that. You do need to make that philosophical shift.
Yeah, what is it that we're going to focus on, right? Like,
Mm.
what does that look like?
What
And
do we
I
now
think
care about?
incentivizing the consumer is great. I think there's a lot of different ways that we can do that. I'll tell you, shipping charges, even though I'm in supply chain, I
Yeah.
get upset about it. I had to send my suitcase in for repair, and they were like, "We're going to pay for shipping on one side. You need to pay for shipping on the other." And I was like, "But why?
That
This
doesn't
is,
make any sense.
the warranty you decided. Why do I have to pay money
Yeah.
because it like the handle fell apart while I was traveling?"
Yeah, exactly that. And I think in our survey, what became very clear is that the majority of consumers consider like a poor returns policy as a bad experience.
Mhm.
Like it's a
Yes.
bad experience.
Yep.
And that almost is whether you go on a return or not. So you've created a bad experience for the customer, and they may love the product, but they've got a poor sentiment of you and your
Mhm.
brand because they do know that if they had to return, they would have to pay. And if you when you then look at the stat, I think it was 78% of consumers would abandon a retailer after one bad experience.
Wow.
If a bad policy is a bad experience,
Yeah.
then you've lost the customer, and they may not even have had to return.
Right.
It's just their view of you. It's their sentiment of your brand. Your
Yeah.
brand wants to penalize me for shopping the way you've encouraged me to shop.
Right, right, right. And I think it's so interesting because the way that we show up consistently for a customer is going to be the way
Yeah,
that they show up for the
exactly that.
retailer. And so
Yeah,
when you do look at inventory management, when we do look at returns and bringing the inventory back in, who do we want to be? Right? And
yeah,
realistically, what can we do? And if we can't do it this way, how do we talk about it?
yeah.
Because I think also talking about it and being transparent is going to lead to some success. So let's go
Completely.
back to inventory management because I think it's
Yeah,
an evergreen challenge for retailers, brands. Customer expectations are driving speed, right? The way that they shop is changing, which is what we were just talking about. What does all of that look like for retailers and brands right now? Like, why is it so hard to get a handle on all of this?
So I would say there are like the pace of ever changing demands is at the heart of everything. So if we look at the emergence of e-commerce, whether that's pure play e-commerce, the pure play online retailers, or whether it's the emergence of omni-channel, those famous brands that you've loved forever that now sell half their products online and half in
Right.
stores. These things haven't emerged at the same time at the same speed, and so and we should never forget as well that the other than the obvious exception, the vast majority of e-commerce comes from omni-channel retailers, those big brands that have physical stores as well. They access you via multiple channels, and so these things haven't evolved at the same pace. And so the way a retailer historically has thought about inventory and inventory management for a store is very different to what's required when you're thinking about inventory management for Tim and
Right.
Tim's house in Sussex in the United Kingdom. Accessing this house versus accessing a store network is a very different challenge, and it's driven by very different drivers. Um, but there is a lot in there that can be treated the same, and the rules and the logic around how you apply where you put inventory, how you treat inventory, is all driven by demand ultimately. Where are the consumers? What are they likely to buy? When are they going to buy it? How much are they going to pay for it? So if you apply that same logic, why have two buckets of inventory? And the painful truth is, in the most part, omni-channel retailers today have two completely distinct buckets of inventory. One they sell online, one they sell in store. And this will be exactly the same products, the
Hmm.
identical SKUs, but will sit in two different buckets of inventory. And that's because this store inventory is treated, it's acquired, it's stored, it's picked, it's packed, it's distributed. The demand is measured in one way. The demand for this type of inventory is measured in a very different way, and it is therefore the execution of that demand is very different, and
Yeah.
so never do the two meet. So what the next evolution of inventory management is is those two things becoming one, and having sort of systematic capability to be able to apply the same kind of demand and customer experience logic to both when consumers want to buy from stores and where they want to buy from home, and being able to kind of optimize this SKU for this reason. A good example would be we're just working with a customer now, and it's a returns led engagement. But what we're doing with the customer is we're deploying software, and we're deploying intelligence, so that when a consumer returns an item, the first thing we do is look for demand. So before we print the label, whether they print it at home or they print it in a UPS store, we're searching for demand. If there is demand for that SKU in a store,
Uh-huh.
like we know that there's a replenishment requirement in that store, we will send that item to that store, and that item will then be stocked in the store.
Or even a different region, I would assume.
Or a different region. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Whereas this is emerging technology, emerging
Right.
capability, and therefore it's been very hard without modern software that operates at such high speed,
Yeah.
with it's not relying on the human brain to make all these decisions, that
Right.
now you can orchestrate and optimize sort of real time. And instead of having these sort of isolated, siloed pockets of inventory, you are able to fulfill every order, whether it's a
Right.
replenishment in a store or it's a fulfillment to your home, ultimately from the same SKUs. And I think
Yeah.
that's going to be a big, big game changer.
Well, and I think about the capital. You were saying like two
Yeah.
different inventories for either online or in store. The capital is just not going to fly anymore, I don't think.
Yeah.
But I think the
No.
third one to that is the inventory management of the returns. So you
Yeah.
said the inventory management for online, inventory management for in store. And then as we're talking about returns, and you so
Yeah.
eloquently put it earlier, that's a different inventory management strategy in the returns coming back. And what does that look like? I love to hear that you can put it where the demands are. So you
Yeah.
kind of went over the biggest challenges. You did talk a little bit about software. Let's dig into that a little bit more. Like
Yeah.
what role can AI and machine learning? Everybody's talking about AI and machine learning.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
What role does that play in the software? I'm assuming around that demand piece that you just sort of gave us an example on, that
Yeah.
is a key role that it can play. But talk to us
Very
about
much
all
so,
of
yeah.
them.
I would say it's optimization and orchestration, although is the kind of area where in this particular space, AI really changes the game. Because what you've now got is, what are complex like inventory allocation decisions
Hmm.
being made literally at the time that a consumer hits the return button
Yeah.
because we've got to print the right label.
Yeah.
We've got to send the consumer like the drop-off location that they might see on the returns initiation journey will differ depending on the need for the inventory, depending on the demand. And
Right.
so this is happening absolutely real time. We are able to orchestrate, influence consumer behavior, make allocation and replenishment decisions at the point at which I'm literally telling the brand what's happening.
Well, and I would assume that it also can provide choices, or at least that's
Yeah.
coming down the line for the
Oh, no, no,
consumer,
you absolutely, yeah, you would
right?
drive up choice. Yeah, you give the consumer choices based on what you know. So instead of offering an exchange, and then finding, 10 days down the line that you actually don't have the inventory against which you can execute that exchange, we
Right.
know absolutely real time.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
we,
and
we
also
know,
I would assume based on consumer behavior around the choices, because
yeah,
sometimes, you'll see you can return it this way and it'll be less carbon footprint or like, all those kinds of things. I think choices and transparency really are
yeah,
what the consumer wants because everybody wants to know that it's shaped for me and what
yeah.
I want and what's important to me and how I can make an impact because that's what's important. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
very much so. And transparency is one of my favorite subjects around all this. I described to somebody recently, if you think about, if you go into a supermarket now, into a grocery store, and you look at, sort of packaged meat, you know exactly where that came from. You know the carbon footprint of that product. You absolutely know. You trust that product because of the degree of transparency that's been provided.
Right.
You often go into restaurants now and they tell you how many calories are in the dish you're choosing. It might not influence your decision. It might not make you feel better or worse about yourself and the choices you're making. But there is a degree of trust, therefore, associated with you and that brand because they're giving you the good news and the bad news, about the
All at the
choices
same
you're
time.
making, all at the same time. Yeah, all at the same time. The I think in this space, if we want to change consumer behavior, we want consumers to think more carefully about shopping habits, the choices they might make, the extent to which they actually would rely on a return of a $15 t-shirt.
Mhm.
We should be transparent with them.
Yeah. Well,
We
and
should get
I
to the
I
point
talked
where
a
we
lot.
can tell them.
Yeah, I spoke a little bit before. I did a video about this about a month or so ago around digital product passports. And so when you talk
Mm,
about transparency, part of that comes in educating and
yeah,
also providing choices where the choices that they make, they're empowered to make those choices be part of the decision. But ultimately, it also takes the product down a path that's best for the retailer and the brand. And it has to be that push pull between the two of them. Now, I talked about, well, you spoke about it first, but I mentioned that return inventory
yeah,
excess inventory, extra inventory should be, or sorry, returns should be considered as a source of that extra inventory. And how you manage
yeah.
that can really impact your supply chains for the positive and the negative. Can you
Mm.
talk about the impact of really honing in and, treating it like an extra source of inventory?
Yeah. Well, and this, we've been struggling for a while to kind of decide how we would describe this problem or opportunity around returning inventory.
Right.
And then a customer of ours really nailed it. He said, you see, the problem I've got is that returns are my worst supplier. Most days, about 40% of inbound SKUs that come into my warehouse are returns. And I don't know what it is. I don't know where it's come from. I don't know whether I can resell it. I don't know what condition it's in. But this is valuable inventory that my business, the whole business model relies on us selling at full price or as close to full price as possible.
Hmm.
And so I think that really kind of identifies the problem but the opportunity. And so I would, and he and I then ended up in a conversation about, if I would put my best analysts, my best merchandisers, my best inventory managers on this problem, not the inbound stuff that's come in 6 weeks on a boat from somewhere the other side of the world, that you know exactly what
Right.
it is, what condition it's going to be, where you're going to sell it, how many you're likely to sell. I would focus my best talent on this because what you've got there is you've got if you use the technology in the right way, you can provide yourself all of the visibility that you would expect from brand new products. You can find out very quickly what it is, where it is, when it's coming, what condition it's likely to come in,
Hmm.
and you can very quickly know whether there is demand for that product and where. And so let's assume those items come back into your facility. The moment you scan a return in, as long as you've used a kind of end-to-end returns management solution, that you will be told immediately whether that is a high priority or a medium or low priority item. If there is absolute real time demand for that item, either online or in store, you would reprocess that quickly.
Hmm.
You would do a visual inspection. You would decide whether it needs
Yeah.
any reprocessing, any cleaning or rebadging or repackaging, and you would put it through like a high speed route, and you would try and fulfill from that before the end of that shift. And you
Yeah.
try and get through those high priority items as quickly as possible.
Well, and because I think you said 40%, right? I
Mm.
mean, if we're thinking
In
about
clothing,
the
apparel can be 40%. Yeah.
Yeah, and if we're thinking about retailers and brands right now, we were talking about tariffs earlier. They're now coming to a decision of do we increase our prices or do we eat the margin for the time being? Now, if you
Yeah.
think about bringing that 40% back into inventory that you can then
Yeah.
resell and optimize,
Yeah.
then that decision actually can be made a little bit easier and everybody wins, right?
Definitely.
And I want to mention something because I think Blue Yonder recently acquired a company called, is it Optoro?
Toro, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you tell us about that acquisition? What does that mean for customers with what we're talking about today?
Yeah, so Optoro is great business, like great story, like all the businesses you want to be part of, great sort of history, business kind of originally emanated from the growth of eBay and therefore reselling secondary inventory, and then moved into the return space. But ultimately, Optoro have built some great technology that really sort of kicks in at the point at which an item return lands back at a warehouse.
Hmm.
So it consumes all that information that the consumer provides about the item, why it's coming back, where it's coming back, what condition they should expect. And then it provides an extraordinary amount of efficiency in the warehouse to like reprocess and prepare those items quickly for sale. But the second thing the Optoro platform does really well is it kind of accepts that there are going to be a percentage of occasions where you're not going to be able to get that item back out at full price. So what it is it's integrated into lots of different secondary channels
Hmm.
that can both maximize the return for the retailer, i.e., it might be a liquidation channel or it's a resale, reuse
Right.
channel, like pre-loved type of businesses, um, or it's a channel through which you can drive up your percentage of gifting if you're a business, and that might be some brands that is a channel they choose to support, and
Right.
that's one of the business objectives they're trying to achieve. And so what we now have is we are pushing real-time returns data into our planning products real time every day to make sure that we're making the right allocation, replenishment, kind of supply chain planning decisions. We're then pushing those that data into transport management solutions to make sure we're offering up the right carrier networks, the right drop-off locations for consumers, so that we're optimizing the transport element of it. What we
Yeah.
now can do is really optimize the warehouse,
Yeah. Well,
and multiple choices in that regard.
and the fact is, like, that product comes in and they already know once it comes in which pile it needs to go into. And
Yeah,
so it flows and it moves faster. There's no
moves
second
quickly. Yeah,
guessing. There's no, does it go to liquidation?
yeah.
No, this one does go to
No,
liquidation because we've already evaluated and we've given you the information.
the logic is already in place.
Yeah.
And what that allows us to do is, I mean, Optoro have some phenomenal use cases. A good one would be, a very famous sneaker, as you guys would say, manufacturer, um, uh, takes in lots of pre-used, pre-loved products every year, and resells those through pre-loved channels. It's the Optoro product that inbounds those goods and then runs those workflows in the warehouse to clean, repair, sanitize, and then repackage those items.
Huh.
And that is becoming, particularly in certain segments, higher
Yeah.
value apparel, footwear, that's becoming a really valuable outlet for retailers to maximize the return on that inventory.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the product also handles millions of returns for a high street fashion brand, and it's all just about speed and efficiency. Get these
Right.
things back into stock as quickly as possible,
Yeah, yeah. And it depends on the
and
product, it depends on the brand, it
yeah,
depends on the experience that they want to provide. I need to get the name of them though from you after this because I wear through my shoes, but they're not all like ready
yeah,
to go. You know what I mean? To go to the
no,
landfill or
exactly,
anything
yeah,
like that.
no, we
And
should. We
actually,
should.
I want to talk about that because as I was doing the research for this episode, your survey also revealed that 71% of respondents said they would not complete the returns process if they knew their return product might end up in the landfill. Now
Yeah,
that's a huge number, and I want retailers and brands, I want supply chain professionals and leaders who are listening to this really have that sink in
think about
because
that.
if you're not focused on this, you're losing 71% of those people returning and coming back to you. And so that really in and of itself is a bit of a competitive advantage. You've talked
Absolutely.
about ways that they've used the process for circularity. I've talked about how do we think about sustainability? What does that look like? What's
Mhm.
important to the consumer? And so it's interesting to hear that number. And if you really focus on what we're talking about today, you can make a huge difference. I mean, 40% going back into your inventory for resale at
Yeah,
100%, that's a big deal.
it's remarkable.
71% of people not coming back because their product might end up in a landfill. Those are very tangible things that you can change easily and quickly to be able to
Yeah.
keep those customers. So I want to ask you then, like, how can businesses work with you? What are the next steps? What does that look like? How do they capitalize on the 40% we talked about, maybe even that 71% I just mentioned?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, as hopefully you can tell, we're super excited about this space. We've Blue Yonder's invested a significant sum of money in this space over the last few years through acquisition and continued product development. It's because we absolutely believe this is the direction of travel for everybody. I think my boss, our CEO, talks about sustainable abundance, being one of the big objectives for the future for us and others in the supply chain. And I think the returns management is a key space. I mean, for us, I think we've got about, I don't think there's anybody in the industry that has the insight that we do because of those investments we've made and
Yeah.
the use cases to prove where you can get the value. But the best thing for us to do is to prove it, and therefore, anybody watching this podcast, if this ignites any interest whatsoever, you will either have a Blue Yonder account manager because you're one of the 3,000 where we have regular day-to-day relationships, or if not, we're easily accessible via our website. There are dedicated returns management, inventory management pages on the website which click through to my team. So,
Mm,
and we would be delighted to have those conversations because, like, the time is now. Really, the technology is now at a place where it is scalable, usable, and making a real difference. And, as you say, in this age of uncertainty, surely now is the time to really get on top of this and make the changes in your business and your philosophy about how you think about returns.
Yeah. Well, and who doesn't want 40% more of their product to come back
Exactly.
in
Yeah.
and resold for 100%? I mean, that is
Exactly.
definitely something I think all retailers and brands must be looking at right now.
Yeah.
And, we're talking more and more about the final mile, but I don't think we're talking about returns as much as we should be, especially how we've been talking about it today, but then also the data from your survey as well. And so, what you're doing at Blue Yonder is really great to hear. I can't wait to see how retailers really start to better optimize returns. And I think it's just across the board, good for everybody, good for the
Yeah.
environment, and so much more. So, did you have a guess at today's big question? Well, at the top of the show, I asked you what percentage of global respondents will stop shopping at their favorite retailer if stricter returns policies aren't implemented. So, this is different from what I had said before with the 71%. It's a huge 84%. So if you want to keep your customers happy, your profits up, it's time to start rethinking your approach to returns. Remember, 40% of that inventory back in and being sold at 100%. Like this is where things matter. This is what matters to your bottom line and your margins. So, if you want to understand your consumer and develop win-win return processes, head over to blueyonder.com to learn more and download the report in full that we've been talking about today. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show and check out more content from the best and brightest over at letstalksupplychain.com. We've got incredible guests, innovative strategies, and transformative solutions you cannot afford to miss. Tim and the team at Blue Yonder, thank you so much for making this episode happen. Tim, thanks for coming on and
Thank you
sharing
very
all your
much.
great insights.
No, thanks. It's been great. As you can tell, I love talking about this stuff, so much appreciated.
Yeah, I can hear your passion. I feel like, your passion is going right through the screen, and that's what we need. That's what we need behind the technology, behind the people in our supply chain. So I love that. Well, until next time, everybody,
Thank
this is
you.
Sarah Barnes Humphrey from Let's Talk Supply Chain.